Hello again and welcome. Once again, our podcast series over the last several weeks has been with Susan Minaya, COO, Chief Learning Strategist, and Executive Coach, talking about 5 things training wants the business to know. Last week, she talked with us about the 4th thing, training should be part of change initiatives. This week, you guessed it, Susan talks with us about the 5th thing. Stay tuned to learn more. Hello, Susan.
Hey, Dario.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Once again, 5th time in a row now. I am excited to hear about the 5th thing training wants the business to know. So out with it. What is the 5th thing?
Okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, the 5th thing is that training isn't always the right intervention.
Okay.
Okay, right?
All right. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's dig into it.
So actually, this will bring us back to the first thing because we touched on it a little bit back in the first thing session that we had. Recall we spoke about how organizational leaders come to the learning leader with their training order, right? We need training. I think that stems from really business leaders really viewing training and development as providers of training, right? So, but really, we should be viewed as performance consultants because they may not understand that there's a wide swath of capability, right, that the learning organization brings. They think training. So we have way more than that one tool called training in our performance toolkit. So when you have a performance problem, we're going to start by asking what performance problem you're trying to solve.
You know, that's interesting because when I think about the solutions we offer our clients, it isn't always a training issue.
I know.
You're right. But they came asking for training.
They do. That's what happens, Dario. So, but really great learning leaders and those in their learning organizations are really good at sleuthing for the performance problem. The most effective learning organizations have a broader perspective on what gets in the way of performance, and they do that by looking at 3 specific areas.
I believe that is from the work of Dr. Roger Addison, Carol Haig, and Lynn Carney called The Performance Architect. I believe you worked with them when you were at AAA and CNU, right?
Yes, I did. I learned a lot from them, actually.
If I remember, I feel it's a great model to break down the root cause of performance problems. It's not always what you might think, yeah?
Exactly. And it's a great framework for any practitioner to use. So I really wanted to talk about it here so that people kind of understand that process. The Performance Architect is a great resource for learning organizations, really to elevate their performance consultative capabilities in ways that really drive performance outcomes, right? So shall we break it down?
Yep, let's break it down.
Okay, let's do it. So one of my favorite lines when people come asking for training is, well, if training is the solution, then hey, what's the problem? So that's like putting the cart before the horse, right? There's nothing wrong with knowing that there's a problem, but solutioning for it before you know the root cause of the problem really, you get a lot of bad performance outcomes, right? So,
Yeah, I can understand that.
So that's why analysis is really so important for the right performance outcomes. So first, let's define the problem before we identify the right intervention, right?
Right. So when the learning professional is doing that analysis, how does that define the right intervention?
That's a really good question. So best practice has them looking at 3 key areas: the workplace, the work, and the worker. So for the workplace, the learning practitioner is really looking at things from an organizational level, Dario. This includes like an external scan. It can be as broad as general economic factors, maybe politics, impacts things. We've had that experience with DE&I stuff recently, right?
Yes, we have.
Economic, demographic, technological, or cultural type things. And then from there, they'll look at industry-specific factors, right?
Okay.
So is the industry expanding or is it shrinking? Are there competitive risks? Maybe competition is stealing market share, which is why sales may be starting to get reduced, as an example. So the learning practitioner will also look at the internal organization, right? So we looked outside. Now we're going to look inside as it relates to how the work aligns with the mission, the goals, the strategies, and the incentives. This is often an area where the wrong behavior is being incentivized. So changing how employees are rewarded can change performance, right? So when you're looking at the internal systems, you could see we may encourage collaboration, but actually we're encouraging huge competition and we're making people kind of be cutthroat with each other and nobody's going to be collaborative, right? So these are things that really can impact performance for sure. When we look at the area where there's wrong behavior that's being incentivized, changing how employees are rewarded can actually change performance. And so that's really important. And you know what? That's not training.
No.
How is the work environment, right? What is the culture like there? We talked about that just a second ago.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like, so what equipment and resources are available? Sometimes they don't have what they need to do their job, right? But people don't know that. So they're lagging or whatever. So what does it look like when they're there? How are they leveraging technology to be more efficient at the job? And what is the leadership impact on performance and culture? Maybe it's not the employees. Maybe it's actually the leaders.
I will say,
Dun, dun, dun.
dun, dun, dun.
Hmm.
I will say that makes sense. Having done sales myself in a highly competitive insurance
Yeah.
industry, there's always new competition that erodes the pipeline potential.
Yep, for sure. You definitely know firsthand on that. And so for the work, that's the next one. Learning practitioners are focusing on kind of process and practice, right? So
Mhm.
this is where we kind of look at that kind of broad systems approach. So what is the work? What are the standards of performance? What are the inputs and the outputs that are coming in for that particular area? What are the policies and procedures? Are they being followed? Are the right people doing the right work? Or is something bogging them down? Is it really a lack of skill or is it a lack of will? So, this is where I typically do job mapping for clients to really identify the work that's being done. These are really eye opening exercises for organizational leaders because it can really help spotlight where there are the biggest issues or why.
Mm.
So, this is especially fun, I think, when there are similar roles in multiple locations because there's always stuff that doesn't jive, right?
Yeah.
With job mapping, it's really easy to see how things can go askew just based on process, location, and leadership, et cetera, right?
Yeah, the job mapping is really an eye-opening process. I've seen the output of the job mapping you've done
Yep.
for our clients, and it's amazing how you can reframe what's important for employees to learn. Okay, following this, what's next?
Okay. All right. So, next and finally,
Oh,
okay,
okay.
there's the worker.
Oh, down to the worker,
Down
finally.
to the worker, right? So, given all the scans of the work in the workplace, it becomes easier, in my opinion, it becomes much easier to view the worker in the context of what is known about the workplace and the work, right?
Mm.
So, here it's like starting at a macro level and we're going down to a micro level.
Yeah.
Here's where you can really distill if it is really a performance problem, a skill or a will problem that needs to be solved? Or is it a lack of maybe performance management, which again, definitely isn't a training issue, right?
It's like funnel analysis.
Yeah. It's like funnel.
Hey, I think I just coined a new analysis term. Okay, I'm sorry. Keep
I
going.
think you did too. I think you did too, but that's what it is, right? So you kind of, when you start at the micro, you can't really see above you all the things that could be impacting. So that's why that's the approach I prefer to take. So as you can see, there are many factors that impact performance, and it isn't always training that will fix the performance problem.
Mhm.
That's why training wants the business to know that training isn't always the right solution. So, where the training and the business are always aligned is in the area of performance improvement, really. And that is a great start. So, how that performance improvement is accomplished can be so many different things, often a combination of things and typically never just one thing.
I have to say, it feels so systemized.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with systems, they work. And, it is because it really introduces the notions of systems thinking. And you know how I
Yeah.
am about systems thinking, right?
Yes,
To
I know.
identify the problem and the intervention to really improve the overall process.
Yeah.
Right?
And I mean, that makes perfect sense because we've landed back on what you were always talking about with organizations about having a systems view whenever you're tackling a challenge or opportunity.
Yeah. So I'm kind of sad because this is the end of our podcast series, I think, right?
Is this the end already? Yes. No,
Yes,
5
it is.
things.
At least
5
for
things.
now. I think 5 things is enough, don't you?
I do, but I suspect you'll be back with 5 more things at some point. I've really enjoyed the podcast series and
Me
I've learned a
too.
lot and it confirmed a lot for me. So thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Dario. This has really been a pleasure. I've loved doing this, and hopefully, business leaders really understand training a lot better because of this podcast series. And I hope that learning leaders feel like they're supported and they're being heard. So thank you.
Well, thank you again, Susan, on sharing with us for this series, 5 things training wants the business to know. And for closing us out on the 5th thing, training isn't always the right intervention. Thank you all for listening in. We hope you enjoyed and gained some insights. Until next time.